Welcome to AI 101 for Teachers. My name is Jess. I'm a former teacher and now specialize in adult learning. I will be your guide for this professional learning series. Artificial intelligence has become a hot topic in education, leaving many educators wondering about things like, what is AI? Are my students going to use AI to cheat? Is AI going to replace me as a teacher? What should I be teaching my students about AI? Throughout this professional learning series, our goal is to answer these questions and more, while also equipping you with the knowledge and skills you will need to navigate this new landscape. In this session, we will hear from Haadi Parttovi, the creator of Code.org, and Sal Khan, the creator of Khan Academy. Let's hear what Haadi and Sal have to say about some of the biggest questions related to AI in education.
AI has been around for many years, but what's happened very recently with the launch of ChatGPT and similar tools is that AI can actually generate information. It can generate creative writing, images, even videos. And so what used to be a tool for pattern matching can actually create new ideas, new thoughts. And the reason this is very important in education is there's so many aspects of education, work that either teachers do or that students do, that can now be done automatically using generative AI.
So I know, like, both of us, I'm sure, as just tech nerds of sorts, have been paying attention to generative AI for many years. And you had GPT-2, which could write, and Elon Musk famously said, this has to be controlled in some ways because it could write very convincing articles, but it was nonsense what it was writing. So it could be good for generating fake news. GPT-3 did similar things, although it was just better at it, which in some ways made folks even more worried. Then things like DALL-E came out, where it showed that you could create images, that you could have the Mona Lisa, and you could tell the computer or the generative AI to say, well, what's the back of her head look like? Or what does the rest of the scene actually look like? When I was monitoring all of that over the years, I was just like, oh, this is cool, but it's really just a quirky thing. It's not going to be really useful anytime soon, especially in education. And I think what really changed was that transition from GPT-3 to either you could say GPT 3.5, which is ChatGPT, or more importantly, GPT-4. And that's when it really hit me that this thing that looked like a novelty for the last several years now could start to have seemingly understand information and make sense of it, and not just answer the question, but explain why it chose that answer, explain why the other choices are not the answer. Generative AI, it could generate other questions like it. And you could prompt it so that it could act as a tutor, it could act as a teaching assistant. And so that's when we started to appreciate, okay, the world is now different. And this is not only going to be relevant to education, but it's probably going to transform it in some pretty significant ways.
When you use a tool like ChatGPT or any tool that's generating text or code as an AI, these are based on an underlying technology called a large language model. And a large language model is basically a giant neural network that is trained on all sorts of information, all the books or articles or code that it can find on the internet, and then can actually generate new information, new essays, stories, even writing new code. And it's worth understanding that this technology is not truly intelligent. It is just using statistics and probabilities to generate new information. At Code.org, we're actually creating a video series explaining exactly how large language models work. And in fact, the Chief Technology Officer of OpenAI, Mira Murati, is one of the stars of this video to talk about basically an explanation of large language models.
Well, one thing I will say, because people often say, oh, it's just statistically figuring out the next best word to say. In a lot of ways, it's starting to teach us a little bit about ourselves. Like even when I'm talking right now, when I'm speaking in oral language, I'm just expressing a series of thoughts that are coming, and I'm not consciously deciding each next word. I just know that the next word is going to be whatever it is going to be. So large language models, to your mention, it's a neural net. Neural nets are essentially computer simulations of neurons and synapses. And they're starting to approach the complexity of at least large chunks of the human brain.
We're not at a point where AI is conscious of itself or has its own motivations and desires other than what we ask it to do. But yeah, it's worth noting that the probabilities and statistics, the numbers inside of an AI, a generative AI large language models, are basically literally the computer equivalent of the synapses and the connections in the nerves in your brain. And you have trillions of nerves in your brain, and then the strengths of all those synapses is what forms your memories, creates your thoughts, and gives you all of your intelligence. In a large language model, that's being simulated across literally millions of computers. And is that intelligent? It's at least a representation of how your brain works. And it's interesting that this works on math, your brain works on neurons, but the outputs of what a large language model provides are quite similar to what humans do themselves. I think pretty much anybody working in education was surprised to be able to ask AI to write an essay about the Civil War, or explain photosynthesis, or create a short story about a princess living on Mars, or write the code to shuffle a deck of cards. Whatever it is, these are things that you might think of as homework or as exams. For teachers, you can just ask it to make a lesson plan or to make a presentation about some topic in history. And it pretty much does all of it pretty well. And it is really causing a need to rethink how we do education.
And what's even, I 100% agree, what's even more amazing than that is it can answer these questions and do these tasks, but then you could even ask it to take on roles and personas. You can say, be Robin Williams in Dead Poet Society and inspire me about literature. And it did it. And that's when it's like, this is getting weird fast.
It's hard for schools to say what tools you do or don't use when you do homework. So the reality is the way homework is taught or assigned in most schools today, lots of it can be done automatically with AI. When ChatGPT first came out, I showed it on the first day to my son. He's 16. And his first question was, can I use this for homework? He was like excited. And then while I was about to answer, he said, actually, what's the point of school if this can even do all these things? And those two questions are sort of the two bounds of what I think educators need to think about, because if we just continue assigning homework the way we have been, yes, you can use AI to do that, and you could argue that that's cheating, but I actually think we need to evolve what we think about as being the work that students need to do at home.
Your point about homework, you have very little control about what happens, but I think in some ways this shines a healthy spotlight, because before ChatGPT, you had Chat Big Sister, or some people had parents or tutors, and a lot of poor kids did not have any of those things. The biggest inequity that forms in our school system is when the kids aren't in school. It happens when you assign homework. You or I can help our kids, or we might be able to help get a family member to do it, or we might be able to hire a tutor. A lot of families can't afford to do that. That's where the inequity develops. And if you can do more in school, the better.
When you think about equity in AI, there's two almost opposite things going on. On the one hand, AI closes an equity gap in that every student who has access to it now can get basically a low-cost personalized tutor. They can get a lot of things done that in the past you needed basically more money to get done. AI basically provides a superpower to anybody who has access. On the flip side, the student who doesn't have internet access, doesn't have a device, whether it's a phone or a computer, is actually now farther behind, because the gap of not having a computer became more costly than it was before, because here's this yet another superpower that you don't have. AI technology as a whole can have strengths and benefits, as we've talked about, but it also has downsides and risks. It makes mistakes. It could create misinformation. It can have biases. It can have either a political bias or a racial or gender bias. It might get tricked into creating dangerous content. There's all sorts of potential pitfalls. And this is part of why schools and educators have in many cases hit on the brakes to say, let's not jump into this too quickly. But it's worth noting that there isn't a single tool that is all of AI. There's multiple tools coming out, some of which are general purpose, like ChatGPT, which is not even licensed for use by students under the age of 18. But there's tons of tools that are being created specifically for the purpose of education. Khan Academy's Khanmigo being a great example of that, where these tools have done specific things to protect against these risks and these downsides, to protect student privacy, to prevent the creation of misinformation or hallucination or biases or dangerous content. So the most important jobs educators, or at least education IT departments, need to think about is not whether you ban AI or allow AI. It's really choosing which tools are the ones which AI tools are the ones that are ready for education that address these downsides.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And even on those very real downsides like bias and misinformation and making mistakes, hallucinations, I also always point out that, compared to what is already there and what also has bias and misinformation, the internet has all of those issues. Other human beings have all of those issues. And there's often not the transparency where you can audit what was said or what bias might be introduced. So in some ways, it's just an extension of a lot of that. We were working on generative AI and large language models from about mid-2022, and then we all remember, end of November, ChatGPT comes out. But that took the world by storm because when you chat with it, it just seemed to feel a little bit more magical, as we all remember. But immediately, the education community and teachers rightfully saw, wait, this thing can write essays. And I'm sure a lot of students realized that this thing could write essays, and it was a cheating tool. And I was really worried because I was like, yeah, yes, it can be a cheating tool, and ChatGPT was not designed for education. So in March, when we were able to launch what we call Khanmigo, we were able to show that not only can you mitigate some of that, you can create generative AIs that have guardrails. Everything that a student does, it's monitorable by a teacher. You can have a second AI monitor what the student's doing with it. So if they do anything shady, whether it's unproductive, unhealthy behavior, all the way to cheating, it can actively notify the parents or actively notify the teacher. And then on top of that, create ways so the AI isn't doing the work for you, but doing it with you. So if you ask Khanmigo to write your paper, it won't, but it say, I can be your writing coach. And so we think the future is actually going to be, there's going to be certain tasks where I think teachers will say, yes, use whatever tool you want, because that's happening in the workforce where sometimes you do want to use these tools to maybe write some parts or give you some revision or craft some parts of what you're doing. But then there's going to be other places where teachers are going to say, I need to make sure you're writing this yourself. So what we're doing on our side, we're trying to create those tools where teachers can assign through the AI can work with the student, and the AI can report back to the teacher. Yeah, I worked with them. We did some outlining, we did some brainstorming. I gave them some feedback. And this is where they are now. And this is even my first pass at how they did according to the rubric.
When educators think about generative AI, the first thing they hear about or think about often is ChatGPT because of its popularity and because it was the first popular sort of generative AI tool that took the world by storm. But it's worth noting that almost every tool in tech is going to have an element of generative AI built into it. And this is actually most relevant as some schools early on banned ChatGPT just to sort of say, like, can we stop this and figure it out? But we should recognize that Microsoft Word is going to have generative AI. It'll just create documents for you. PowerPoint or Google Slides or Google Spreadsheets or Excel, they will generate formulas or generate slides. There's even an app called Gamma that will generate an entire presentation, start to bottom. You just give it a topic, it'll give you an outline. You edit the outline, it generates the entire presentation for you. There's coding tools that automatically write code. And many of these are built on the same underlying technology as ChatGPT, the large language models. But there's not just one tool. It'll be impossible to ban this in education because we won't be banning Microsoft Word and Google Docs usage in schools. So schools need to figure out how to embrace that this technology is going to be available. There's going to be tools like Khanmigo that are designed specifically for education. And then there's going to be tools that are designed for general purpose work. But schools will need to figure out that students will have access to these whether they like it or not. There's a lot of sort of questions being raised about, is AI going to replace jobs? And there may be some jobs that are completely replaced, but when it comes to teaching, I'm quite sure we're not going to have less of a need for teachers. Globally, the world has a massive teacher shortage. If AI can simply help make the job of teaching easier, reduce the sort of hardship of teaching, enable more personalized learning, we might at least get to a point where we no longer have teacher shortages. we're far from a worry of teachers losing jobs when we have such a dramatic shortage. And what I believe AI is going to do is enable more personalized learning, less busy work on the job of the teacher, more coaching and facilitating and working with that kid who has something is blocking them, or they're struggling with something, or they need a motivation boost or whatnot, where so much of a teacher's day is busy doing things that aren't directly with that student. AI should help us get us to a world where teachers spend more one-on-one time with students. And that is not about job losses in education. It's about really empowering teachers to do the work that they really got into the field to do.
I couldn't agree with you more. When I think of the jobs that are safest in this generative AI world, anything that is really about that human connection and about kind of elevating and almost being the conductor of other human beings, I think are going to be a very good place to be. And generative AI is going to make that job a lot more sustainable, to your point. The reason why we have the shortage is because so much teacher burnout. If you can take the administrative things off of a teacher's plate and also give them ways to support their students better in a more differentiated way, they're going to be enjoying their work more. What I've told a lot of teachers is, imagine if all of a sudden the Department of Education or your district said, hey, good news everyone, we somehow found budget to give every one of you 5 teaching assistants who are just going to be there, do what you need, help you with lesson plans, help you grade papers, help you work with your students, answer questions when you're not, but they're going to report back to you, and they're going to do exactly what you want. I think every teacher would celebrate. That's what's about to happen. Generative AI is going to touch every industry at every possible part of it. Now, I do want to make clear, a lot of people have started to differentiate, which I think is an important thing, between jobs and tasks. I think it's going to allow a lot of folks to do more tasks more productively, but it's not going to replace, in many cases, whole jobs. So pretty much any job where you have to do any type of writing, I think you're going to have a productivity improvement at least 2x, probably more. Any job where you have to create presentations, you have to create any type of artifact, probably.
I would say any job that involves working with a computer in any way is going to become, in some way, not replaced by AI, but easier by AI, which means whether you're writing code, whether you're reviewing contracts, if you're writing a patent, if you're reviewing a patent, if you're creating marketing, if you're posting to social media, if you're creating a spreadsheet or analyzing data with a spreadsheet, everywhere from marketing to sales to accounting, you name it, AI isn't going to replace your job. It'll make your job easier because certain tasks that are repetitive will become completely automated. Certain tasks where you might have writer's block, AI might make the first draft for you or help you out or give you corrections to basically reduce the time you need to spend to get the job done. One of the things that's important is when you think about how much all digital work is going to be impacted by AI is recognizing how critical it is that our education system teaches students what this is, how to use it, how it works, and what are its risks, what are its strengths and weaknesses. Because right now, most adults just treat it as a sort of magical tool, like, oh, it just came out and it's magic. But it's important to actually understand the underpinnings of what is a large language model, realizing that it's using statistics to generate its thoughts, to realize that that statistical generation is why it can make mistakes, and recognizing that it's been trained on data. So the data that it's used to figure out what it's creating could have biases, could have, missing gaps in the data, things like that. It's important for students to, as they get prepared for this workforce of the future, to know how the technology they're using in these future jobs is actually working.
So one thing that a lot of non-teachers don't realize, but every teacher realizes, is that almost half of their time is grading papers, writing progress reports, generating lesson plans, and
not in the classroom with the students.
It might be happening in the classroom,
but not with students.
But it's not facing the students. And that's above and beyond all of the issues around, in a typical classroom, you might have 3, 4, 5 grade levels of students. And so you're trying to differentiate and address all that. But generative AI, we think, is going to be a huge gift to teachers. Almost everything else in ed tech, even if it's very valuable, a lot of stuff we've historically done at Khan Academy, we think it can really enhance what's happening in the classroom. But teachers are like, oh, it's just one more thing for me to learn, and I'm already burnt out. But what's exciting about generative AI, that, let's call it 10, 15, 20 hours a week where teachers are writing lesson plans, writing progress reports, rubrics, et cetera, grading papers, that might, over the next few years, come from 15 hours, 20 hours a week down to a few hours a week. So that's going to save a lot of time and energy for teachers, one, to recharge themselves because they're getting spread too thin, and also have more time and energy for their students. And then, of course, it's going to help them create more differentiated instruction. It's going to be able to support them as teaching assistants. It's going to be able to support the students as tutors or teaching assistants in the classroom, so they'll also be able to personalize more for their students.
Yeah, some of this is stuff that is already available, and a lot of it is going to be worked into the tools that teachers already use to make grading easier, or creating rubrics, or even testing work against the rubrics is something that AI can now do for you. So lots of tools are going to be incorporating this into them to make teachers' lives easier.
Even before ChatGPT and generative AI, people were like, well, the world is changing so fast. What do kids need to learn? And they're oftentimes surprised that I said, well, it's actually the same traditional skills. If you learn to write really well, if you have a solid knowledge base, say of civics, financial literacy, if you have, you know how to use tools well, and increasingly these are going to be technological tools. You have strong critical thinking skills, as probably at least as an early algebra type of level, some statistics knowledge, you're going to be quite potent in any point in history. And I think that's going to be even more so in this generative AI revolution. A lot of people say, well, the generative AI can write papers now. The generative AI is going to be able to solve the math problem. But one way to think about it is students of the future are going to have to manage these generative AI. And if I told you that somebody's going to be an editor of a newspaper, they're going to have to manage writers, does that person need to know how to write? And you're like, not only do they need to know how to write, they need to know how to write better now, because they're going to be managing other people. They're going to act as an editor. So generative AI doesn't give us a free pass to say, oh, no one has to learn any of this stuff anymore. For the folks who want to operate in the knowledge economy and want to have really well-positioned careers, they need to elevate above the generative AI and know how to manage those generative AI. So that means not just understanding the tools, but it actually means understanding the underlying skills that the generative AI is doing better than the AI itself.
If I think about the skills that are going to be most relevant for the future, it's those things that you mentioned: critical thinking, problem solving, reading, and writing. I also think digital skills, both knowing how to use digital tools, but also actually understanding how they work, are going to be more and more important in the workplace. People also ask me all the time, because I run code.org, whether coding jobs are going to disappear because AI can now write code. And it's very similar to writing. AI can write essays. Do we stop teaching writing anymore? I don't think anybody is questioning whether we should stop teaching people to write, because writing is a form of communication. And for the exact same reason, we shouldn't stop teaching coding. As you mentioned, they see the person who knows how to code just got a superpower because they can manage a team of coders that are AI. Just like a person who knows how to write gained a new superpower because AI could do, they now have a team of writers.
Yeah, you absolutely. No one's going to be able to, maybe people are going to be able to create prototypes of apps without being able to code, but you're not going to be able to create a real app that you could put out in the world, because you're not going to know all of the edge cases, the security holes, the performance issues that it might face. You need to know how to code. We're in this moment right now where, because of ChatGPT and large language models, we're all imagining that AI is going to be this thing that we, for the most part, chat with. I think a lot of people are thinking about, oh, well, you could put text to speech and speech to text, and you could start to talk with it the way that you might do with Siri or Alexa. But what we're starting to see is technologies where the large language models can, even though they're language models, can also understand writing, and they can also generate images. So these different dimensions of generative AI are starting to converge. So it's going to be really interesting over the coming years, probably in the 3 to 5 year time horizon, where a generative AI or an AI is going to be able to make sense of students' writing. It's going to be able to talk with them. It's going to be able to listen in conversations, and it's going to be able to make insights about them. So it's a really interesting time where the traditional chat interface that we all know from ChatGPT, I think, might just be the stepping stone to something much richer.
How far away do you think we are from a point where an AI tutor is actually something that you can see and speak to and hear its responses?
I think 2025, 2026, you'll be able to video conference with an AI tutor, and it'll be pretty thoughtful. It'll be able to remember you. It'll have insights about you. I think the other trend that AI has almost leapfrogged in certain ways, but Apple now is introducing its virtual reality headset. But I have a feeling that's going to take a little bit longer for that to get mainstream. That's probably more in the 5 to 10 year horizon. But yeah, in 10 years, I could imagine that it almost feels like you're in the room with an AI if you have your goggles on. But you're going to be able to Zoom with an AI in the next 3 years.
Yeah, I don't know about the virtual reality part just because of the weight on the head, but video conferencing with an AI, having a personal human-like tutor, I agree, is on the order of 5 years away. And it's worth it for anybody in education to think about what is the world going to be like when every student with a computer with an internet access actually can get a one-on-one tutor. It is a great story from the standpoint of equity because today only the wealthiest families can get one-on-one tutoring for their kids. And now it's going to be something that not just with chatting, but even talking is going to be available.
So if I'm a teacher who's new to this world of generative AI, first I would tell them, breathe, relax, even though it feels like the world is moving very fast. Just the fact that you are thinking about it right now means that you're still on
the cutting edge.
You're on the cutting edge. No need to worry. So especially if you have a few cycles, if it's over the summer, if it's over a holiday, start playing with these tools. You could go to something like ChatGPT, and you could probably make it immediately useful to yourself. Say, hey, help me plan a lesson. Help me create a rubric. Use Khanmigo. Khanmigo has special purpose prompts and layers in there that have the best practices of what does a good rubric look like? What does a good lesson plan look like? We have activities for teachers where they can refresh their own knowledge before they go into a lesson. It can also help create exit tickets, lesson plans, rubrics, learning objectives. And then there's a whole bunch of activities for students. Some of them are just classic tutor me in STEM or tutor me in the humanities. Let's have a conversation with George Washington. Or we're about to read, or we've just read the first 3 chapters of The Great Gatsby. We have a special guest today, kids, Jay Gatsby himself. And then you could, this isn't science fiction. That sounds like science fiction, but literally this exists on Khanmigo today, and teachers can start playing with it literally right now.
You can also ask AI to give you a creative way to teach a certain topic. You know, if you have the same way you've taught something, but you want to mix it up a little, what's a creative way to teach? And then enter the name of a topic, and it'll come up with ideas that might not be ones that the teachers thought of already. So it's a great tool for brainstorming with.
No, and on that point, one of our most used activities by teachers already is create a lesson hook, which is exactly that.
A lesson hook?
Oh, a lesson hook. Like, how do I get the kids excited? And
exactly.
We've been impressed with how creative the AI can get. And once again, it's not about deferring the creativity to the AI. What happens is if you have 2 creative people in the room, it doesn't make one person less creative. It makes them both more creative. So we've seen teachers riff with the AI, and they're like, well, what about this? And the AI is like, oh yeah, and what about this? And then it gets better and better to a place that neither party would have done on their own.
People talk about the risks of AI in education. I actually think the biggest risk is doing nothing, is just saying we're going to teach everything the exact same way as we always have been, and sort of the head in sand approach of just like, let's hope this technology goes away or prevent it from being used in our classrooms. The biggest risk is teaching the exact same subjects the exact same way. The real opportunity with AI is the job of teaching can become easier. The job of learning can become more engaging and more personalized and just more creative. And also, some of the old stuff we may not need to teach anymore, and there's new skills that students can learn. They can learn creating with AI and develop superpowers that kids from last century didn't have.
Wow, there sure is a lot of potential in AI for education. In the next session of this professional learning series, we will dig deeper into AI as we explore what AI is and how teachers can use generative AI for tasks such as lesson planning, creating classroom resources, and saving time on administrative tasks. If you are a teacher who constantly feels like there just isn't enough time in the day, you definitely don't want to miss session 2, Demystifying AI for Educators. In the meantime, be sure to check out our 2 new instructional videos. One video is all about chatbots and large language models. The other video addresses questions such as, does AI really have creativity and imagination? These videos are a great way for teachers and students to learn more about generative AI and how it works. Visit the AI 101 for Teachers website at code.org/AI101 to view these videos and additional resources from code.org, ETS, ISTE, and Khan Academy. Thanks for joining us. See you again in session 2.